The tires of my Ford F-150 crunched on the familiar gravel of my own driveway in Cedar Falls, Iowa. The sound was supposed to be a welcome home, a return to normalcy. But after 2 weeks away, everything felt alien, charged with a silent dread. I was running on fumes, my body a hollowed-out shell after a brutal red-eye flight from Portland. My mom, Helen, had suffered a massive stroke. I'd spent 14 days in a sterile hospital room watching the monitors beep, holding her hand, praying for a miracle. She was stable now, thank the Lord, but fragile. I'd been desperate to get back, desperate to get home to my wife, Carol. Carol has early-onset Alzheimer's. It's a fief, a slow, cruel one that steals memories one by one. 2 weeks apart from her felt like a lifetime stolen from the little time we had left. The house was pitch black. That was the first wrong note in the symphony of homecoming. It was only 8 p.m. Carol, a creature of habit, always kept the living room lamp on, the one with the warm yellow shade we bought on our trip to Savannah. She said it kept the shadows at bay. Now, the shadows had won. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I grabbed my duffel bag from the truck bed, the weight of it mirroring the leaden feeling in my soul. My keys felt foreign in my hand as I fumbled for them under the porch light. That's when I heard it. A sound. Faint but unmistakable. A rhythmic, desperate thump. 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 It was coming from inside the house. My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure fear. I shoved the key into the lock, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The door swung open with a bang against the wall. The sound was clearer now. It wasn't just a thump, it was someone banging on something solid, wood maybe, and beneath it, a voice. Muffled, hoarse, weak, but a voice. Help. Please. It was coming from below, from the basement. Carol! I shouted, my voice cracking with the terror I'd never known. I dropped my duffel bag and sprinted to the basement door. It was always unlocked, but now a heavy-duty steel padlock, one I'd never seen before in my life, was clamped through the hasp, gleaming dully in the hallway light. The thumping from the other side grew louder, more frantic, a desperate Morse code of survival. She's in there. My Carol is in there. Carol! I'm here! I'm coming! I yelled, my voice raw. I scanned the hallway for something, anything. An umbrella stand? Too flimsy. A chair? Too bulky. The garage. I spun on my heel and ran to the connecting door to the garage, my mind a single focused point of rage and panic. There on my workbench was my old, trusty crowbar. I hefted its cold, solid weight. I was back at the basement door in seconds. I didn't think, I just acted. I jammed the forked end of the crowbar into the shackle of the lock. With a guttural roar that tore from the depths of my being, I put all my weight, all my fear, all my love into one violent yank. The metal groaned. A second yank. The wood of the doorframe splintered. A third. The lock gave way with a sharp crack, clattering to the hardwood floor. I threw the door open. The smell hit me first. It was a physical blow, a nauseating cocktail of urine, stale sweat, and the sour tang of pure, unadulterated fear. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers slipping on the plastic. The single, bare bulb flickered on, illuminating a scene from my worst nightmares. Carol was huddled at the bottom of the stairs. My beautiful Carol. She was filthy, her hair matted, her favorite floral nightgown stained and torn. She was trembling violently, her arms wrapped around herself. Her face, once full and rosy, was gaunt. Her skin stretched tight over her cheekbones. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. She looked up, squinting in the sudden light. Her eyes, the same blue that had captivated me 40 years ago, were wide with the confusion and terror that shattered my soul. For a heart-stopping second, there was no recognition, just animal fear. David? Her voice was a dry, broken whisper, the sound of leaves scraping on pavement. David, is that really you? I was down those stairs in 2 bounds, my knees screaming in protest as I landed. I scooped her into my arms. She weighed nothing. a bundle of bones and terror. How long? How long had she been down here? A day? 2? The thought was unbearable. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. I've got you," I whispered into her hair, my own tears mingling with the grime on her scalp. "You're safe now. I've got you." I carried her upstairs, my mind a whirling tornado of disbelief and a rising volcanic fury. Who did this? How could this happen? I laid her gently on the living room couch, her body still racked with tremors. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, my fingers so unsteady I misdialed 911 twice. Finally, a dispatcher answered. "911, what's your emergency?" "My wife," I choked out, giving our address. "She's been locked in the basement. She's dehydrated. She can't have eaten. Please, hurry." As I spoke to the dispatcher, my eyes darted around the room. Now in the light, I saw the other changes. The armchair had been moved. There were cardboard boxes stacked in the corner I didn't recognize. Carol's weekly pill organizer, a rainbow-colored testament to our new reality, was gone from the kitchen counter. The paramedics arrived within minutes, a blur of efficient kindness. They checked Carol's vitals, their faces grim. "Severely dehydrated," one of them, a woman named Amanda, said softly. "Malnourished. Early signs of hypothermia, even though it's been a mild September. We need to get her to the hospital, sir." I just nodded, numb. They loaded my wife onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask over her face. I climbed into the back of the ambulance, holding her limp, cold hand, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. At Covenant Medical Center, they admitted her immediately. The fluorescent lights of the ER felt like an interrogation. A nurse, an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Gail, pulled me aside while the doctors worked. "Mr. Peterson, I need to ask you a difficult question. Do you have any idea how long your wife might have been locked in that basement?" The question landed like a sledgehammer to my chest. The full, horrifying timeline clicked into place. 14 days. I was gone for 14 days. I don't know, I whispered, the words ash in my mouth. "I just got back from out of state. I found her like that." An hour later, a police officer arrived. He was a tall, solid man with a calm demeanor and a detective's badge. "Mr. Peterson, I'm Detective Miller, Cedar Falls PD. We have a specialized unit for situations like this." We sat in the bleak, plastic-chaired waiting room. The air smelled of antiseptic and despair. I told him everything. "My name is David Peterson. I'm 64, retired from a career as a structural engineer. My wife Carol is 62. She was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago. It's been a slow decline. She gets confused, forgets names, loses track of time, but she knows me. She knows our daughter. Our daughter, Jessica, is 36. She's a CPA at a firm in downtown Des Moines. She's married to a man named Brandon. He calls himself a financial disruptor. Always talking about NFTs, metaverse real estate, passive income. I never trusted him. There was a slickness to him, a hunger in his eyes that made my skin crawl. But she loved him, and I wanted her to be happy.
2 weeks ago, I continued, my mom in Portland had her stroke. My brother called me in the middle of the night. I booked the first flight out. Jessica volunteered right away to stay with Carol. "Dad, don't you worry about a thing," she said. "I'll take care of Mom. You just focus on Grandma." I was so grateful. She knew the routines, the medications, how to handle the sundowning when Carol gets agitated in the evenings. I explained how I'd called every day for the first week. Jessica had always answered, her voice breezy. "Mom's fine, Dad. We're watching her game shows. I'm making her eat her veggies." But the second week, the calls went straight to voicemail. She'd text instead. "Sorry, super busy with Mom. She's good. Talk later." She never called back. I'd tried Carol's cell, but it was always off. I'd chalked it up to the chaos. Told myself my mom needed me more. I stayed in Portland. Detective Miller listened, his pen scratching across a small notepad. Then he looked up, his gaze steady and intent. "Mr. Peterson," he asked, and his tone made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. "During those 2 weeks you were away, did you, by any chance, grant your daughter power of attorney over your wife's affairs?" "No," I said, the word sharp and absolute. "Absolutely not." "Did your wife sign any documents that you're aware of?" "Not that I know of." "Why?" He closed his notebook with a definitive snap. "We'll need to investigate further, but Mr. Peterson, based on what you're telling me, this appears to be far more than simple neglect. We'll be in touch." Carol stayed in the hospital for 3 days. They pumped her full of fluids, treated her for malnutrition and exposure. She was physically fragile, but her mind was a labyrinth. She kept asking for Jessie. "Where's Jessie?" she'd murmur, her eyes clouded. "She was just here. She made me soup." "No, sweetheart," I'd say, my heart breaking anew each time. She wasn't. On the second day, while Kara was sleeping under the influence of a mild sedative, I went home. I had to. I needed to see the scene with clear eyes, to understand the architecture of this betrayal. What I found in the basement made me vomit into the utility sink. The padlock I'd broken was just the beginning. In the far corner, tucked behind the water heater, was a 5-gallon bucket. The smell emanating from it was foul. That had been her toilet. A single thin fleece blanket, the one we used for picnics, was crumpled on the cold concrete floor. There was no food, no water, not a single bottle. And the single light bulb in the ceiling fixture had been unscrewed and left on the bottom step. My wife had been left in utter darkness. Upstairs, the evidence was more damning, more calculated. Jessica's sleek silver laptop was still on the kitchen table, as if she'd just stepped away. It was open, the login screen glowing. I'm not a tech-savvy man, but I knew her password. It was the name of her childhood dog, Buster, a relic of a simpler time. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I have no remorse. I logged in. What I found in her files was a roadmap to hell, meticulously planned. There were scanned documents, power of attorney, papers with Carol's shaky but recognizable signature, real estate documents pertaining to our house, bank statements from our savings and checking accounts, and a folder chillingly labeled Project Phoenix Bees Fund. I spent an hour in that kitchen reading through the digital trail of my family's destruction, my hands shaking so violently the cursor danced on the screen. Here's what they had done. Sometime during the first week I was gone, Jessica had taken Carol to a lawyer, a storefront notary in a strip mall in Waterloo, not our longtime family attorney in Cedar Falls. She'd used Carol's confusion to get her to sign the POA documents, likely telling her it was just some paperwork for Dad. The notary, it seemed, hadn't asked too many questions.
With that fraudulent power of attorney, Jessica had accessed our accounts. She had drained our savings account of $85,000, money we had painstakingly set aside for Carol's future care, for the day she might need a specialized memory care facility. She had also taken out a home equity line of credit on our house, our home, fully paid off for 18 years for $125,000. All of it, every last dime of that $210,000, had been wire transferred to an entity called Prairie Star Capital, LLC. 3 clicks later, I discovered Prairie Star Capital was Brandon's company, a shell corporation registered just 8 months ago. Its stated business? Blockchain asset management and digital currency consulting. In other words, Brandon was running a crypto scam, and they had used my wife's deteriorating mind and my absence to bankroll it. But the most monstrous part, the part that made me double over and dry heave, was the reason for the basement. They couldn't let Carol talk to me. If I'd managed to get through, even in her confusion, Carol would have told me something was wrong. She would have cried, been upset, said something that would have raised alarm bells, so they had to silence her. Their solution was a dungeon. I found a text message exchange between Jessica and Brandon, time-stamped from day 3 of my trip. Brandon, any issues? Jessica, she keeps crying for Dad. This is harder than I thought. Brandon, she'll forget. The confusion is on our side here. Just give it another day. Jessica, what if someone comes by to check on her? Brandon, who? Your dad's in Portland. Her friends never come over anymore because of her condition. We're in the clear. Just stick to the plan. They had planned it. They had coldly, deliberately locked a sick, vulnerable, terrified woman in a dark basement to steal her money. I called Detective Miller immediately. He came to the house with 2 uniformed officers. I showed him everything: the laptop, the digital documents, the text logs, the horrifying state of the basement. Mr. Peterson, Miller said, his voice grave, this is elder abuse, financial exploitation, and unlawful confinement. We have more than enough for charges. We'll need a statement from your wife when she's able, but this is a very strong case. Where is my daughter now? I asked, my voice flat. We don't know yet. Do you have their address? I did. Jessica and Brandon lived in a modern apartment building in the East Village area of Des Moines, about an hour and a half away. Detective Miller made a call. Within the hour, officers were dispatched to their address. They were gone. The apartment was empty, cleaned out, but in their haste they had been sloppy. In the trash, officers found torn-up bank statements, a printed itinerary for one-way tickets to Belize, and a crumpled email confirmation from a villa rental company in Ambergris Caye. They were going to run, take the money, and flee to a country known for being a haven for financial fugitives. But they had miscalculated. My mother's recovery had been swifter than the doctors predicted. I'd come home 3 days earlier than my original return date. If I'd stayed in Portland those extra 3 days as planned, Carol would have died in that basement. Jessica and Brandon would have found her body, played the grieving daughter and son-in-law, and been on a plane to Central America before anyone was the wiser. Detective Miller was blunt about it. Your early return, Mr. Peterson, saved your wife's life. That realization, that my own daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, the one I'd comforted through nightmares, had been willing to let her mother die of thirst and starvation for money, was a nuclear bomb detonating in my soul. I couldn't process it. The part of me that was a father simply shut down. The manhunt began. Warrants were issued. Their faces were splashed across the local news, then picked up by national outlets. Daughter and son-in-law wanted in heinous elder abuse case. The media circus began. My phone blew up. Reporters, old friends, colleagues from my engineering firm. I ignored them all. My entire world had shrunk to a hospital room and the fragile woman in the bed. Carol was released on the 4th day. She was still weak, a ghost of her former self. Mentally, she was adrift. She kept asking for Jessica. Is Jessie coming over tonight? Did I do something wrong? Why won't she visit? How do you tell someone with Alzheimer's that their child is a monster? That the person they raised and loved has committed an act of such profound evil it defies comprehension? You can't. So I held her hand, smoothed her hair, and lied. Jessie's traveling for work, sweetheart, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. On the 6th day, they were caught. Jessica and Brandon were arrested at Chicago O'Hare, trying to board a flight to Mexico City, a connecting point to Belize. Homeland Security flagged their passports. Detective Miller called me within the hour. We've got them, David. They're in custody. I felt nothing. No triumph, no relief, just a vast, cold emptiness where my heart used to be. The charges came down like a biblical plague. For both of them, 2 counts of elder abuse, 2 counts of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, 2 counts of unlawful confinement, 2 counts of theft in the 1st degree, and 1 count of forgery. Brandon faced additional, separate charges for securities fraud and running a Ponzi scheme. Prairie Star Capital had taken money from over 24 other investors, mostly elderly or financially naive individuals, promising outrageous returns on non-existent crypto investments. He was just robbing Peter to pay Paul, a classic con. The prosecutor assigned to the case, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Angela Vance, met with me a week later. Mr. Peterson, this is one of the most premeditated and cruel cases of elder abuse I have ever prosecuted, she said, her voice crisp and clear. The planning, the exploitation, the sheer callousness. We are seeking maximum sentences. How long? I asked, my voice a monotone. For the elder abuse and unlawful confinement combined with the financial exploitation, we're looking at 8 to 12 years for Jessica. For Brandon, 10 to 15, plus whatever he gets for the separate fraud charges. And the money? I asked, already knowing the answer. Angela's expression softened slightly. That's going to be difficult. Brandon's fund is insolvent. The money's gone, spent on their lifestyle, moved to offshore accounts we can't touch, or paid out to early investors to keep the scheme afloat. We will pursue restitution orders, but you need to be realistic. The likelihood of recovering a significant portion is very low. The $210,000 was gone. Our security, Carol's safety net, vanished into the digital ether of Brandon's greed. I asked the question that had been burning a hole in my soul. Did she know, Angela? Did Jessica know Brandon's fund was a fraud? Angela opened a thick manila folder. Based on the emails and financial records we've recovered from her laptop and cloud accounts, yes, she knew. She helped him create falsified balance sheets. She used her CPA credentials to lend legitimacy to the scheme when talking to his other victims. She was not a dupe, David. She was a willing and active participant. My daughter wasn't a victim of a charismatic sociopath. She was his partner in crime. The bail hearing was a surreal, painful spectacle. Jessica's lawyer argued for her release. No prior record, ties to the community, low flight risk. Angela Vance eviscerated that argument, presenting the plane tickets, the emptied apartment, the sheer brutality of the crime. The judge agreed with the prosecution. Bail was denied for both. They would await trial in the Polk County Jail. I attended the hearing. I sat in the back and watched my daughter, clad in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, weep and plead with the judge. When her eyes met mine across the courtroom, she mouthed, "Daddy, I'm sorry. Please." I stood up and walked out. I couldn't bear it. The daughter I knew was dead. This was a stranger. The criminal case plodded forward, but I wasn't content to let the state have all the vengeance. I hired a lawyer, a pit bull of a man named Robert Bob Goldstein, who specialized in elder law and asset recovery. "David," Bob said, steepling his fingers, "we hit them civilly, sue them for every penny they took, plus punitive damages for the trauma. Even if they're penniless now, we get a judgment. We put liens on any future assets, inheritance, wages, lottery winnings. We make sure they never have a dollar to their name that doesn't first belong to you and Carol." I filed the lawsuit 2 weeks later. David Peterson, on behalf of Carol Peterson, versus Jessica Peterson Williams and Brandon Williams. The claims: financial exploitation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conversion, civil conspiracy. We sought the $210,000 in stolen funds, plus an additional $250,000 in damages for Carol's suffering. But I wasn't done. I contacted the Iowa Accountancy Examining Board. Jessica had used her license and professional reputation to validate a criminal enterprise. I filed a formal, detailed complaint. Within a month, her CPA license was suspended indefinitely pending the outcome of the criminal trial. A conviction would mean permanent disbarment. She would never work as an accountant again. It should have felt like a victory. It just felt like another funeral. The months blurred together. The stress acted as a potent accelerant on Carol's Alzheimer's. Her neurologist confirmed it. Trauma can dramatically hasten cognitive decline. She stopped asking about Jessica altogether, which was somehow more devastating than the questions. It was as if her mind, to protect itself, had simply deleted the file labeled daughter. I hired a full-time caregiver, a wonderful, patient woman named Maria, to help with Carol while I navigated the legal morass. The bills piled up, medical, legal, and now the monthly payments on the HELOC we never wanted. We were drowning, and the people who pushed us under were sitting in a jail cell. The preliminary hearing was in January. I testified, walking the court through the entire nightmare. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, manipulated by a dominant husband, struggling with the stress of her mother's illness. It was a pathetic performance, and the judge saw right through it. Ms. Peterson-Williams, the judge said, her voice icy, "You are a certified public accountant. You are trained to understand fraud. You understood the legal and financial implications of your actions perfectly. I see no evidence of coercion here." The case was bound over for trial. The date was set for June. Then, in March, the unexpected happened. Brandon's lawyer approached the prosecution with a deal. He would plead guilty to all charges and testify against Jessica. He would state under oath that the scheme was her idea, that she was the mastermind, that he was just following her lead. He was throwing her to the wolves to save his own skin. Angela Vance called me. "If he testifies, David," Angela said, "we have a slam-dunk case against Jessica. His testimony corroborates all the digital evidence. We can guarantee a conviction and a maximum sentence. What are your thoughts?" "Will he serve time?" I asked. "Yes, we're offering him 8 years on the elder abuse and fraud charges with parole eligibility after serving 2/3. He'll do at least 5 years, probably more." "And Jessica? Without this deal, there's always a risk with a jury. With his testimony, we will push for and likely get the full 12 years. I thought of Carol, napping in the other room, her body in our bed but her mind in some unknowable place. I thought of the bucket in the basement. I thought of the $210,000 and the mortgage on her home. I thought of the 14 days of terror. "Take the deal," I said, my voice cold and steady. Brandon pled guilty in April. At his sentencing, he read a prepared statement full of hollow remorse. The judge was not moved. "Mr. Williams, you participated in the systematic exploitation and torture of a vulnerable woman. You displayed a profound lack of human decency. The court sentences you to 8 years in a federal penitentiary." One down.
Jessica's trial began in June. It lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence: the fraudulent POA, the bank transfers, the basement crime scene photos, the text messages, the Belize itinerary. They called Carol to the stand. It was the most agonizing hour of my life. She was confused, couldn't remember dates, and at one point asked the judge if she could go home now. Jessica's defense attorney pounced on her confusion, trying to discredit her testimony. But then Angela Vance played the video. It was the walkthrough video the police had taken of the basement. The camera panned slowly across the dark, cold space, lingering on the bucket, the thin blanket, the scratches on the inside of the door where Carol had tried to claw her way to freedom. The jury watched, stone-faced. One woman put her hand over her mouth. Then Brandon testified. He was a weasel on the stand, but his story was damning. He laid out the entire scheme, pinning it all on Jessica. It was her idea, he said, over and over. She researched the POA laws. She found the notary. She planned it for weeks. She said her mom's confusion was the perfect cover. Even if he was lying to save himself, the digital evidence, her search history, her emails, backed up the core of his story. She had planned this. When Jessica took the stand in her own defense, it was a catastrophe. She tried to play the victim, claiming Brandon had emotionally abused her and manipulated her into it. She cried. She claimed she never meant for her mother to get hurt. Angela Vance destroyed her on cross-examination. "Miss Peterson-Williams, you texted your husband, and I quote, 'She'll forget. The confusion is on our side.' You were talking about your mother, correct?"
Silence. You locked your mother, a woman with Alzheimer's, in a dark basement for 14 days with no food and a bucket for a toilet. You stole $210,000 from your parents' life savings. You plan to flee the country. And you want this jury to believe you never meant for anyone to get hurt? Jessica broke down into incoherent sobs. The jury wasn't buying it. They deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty. On all counts. The sentencing was 2 months later. I read my victim impact statement aloud in the courtroom, my voice trembling not with fear, but with a cold, hard fury. I spoke of the Carol I used to know, the vibrant, funny woman who was now a shell. I spoke of the terror she must have felt. I spoke of the financial ruin and the stolen time. Carol's neurologist submitted a letter detailing how the trauma had irrevocably accelerated her disease. The judge listened to it all. Then she turned to Jessica. Jessica Peterson Williams, you are an intelligent, educated professional. You understood the profound vulnerability of your mother's condition, and you exploited it with a calculated cruelty that is staggering to this court. You betrayed the most sacred bond of trust that exists. I see no mitigating factors. She sentenced my daughter to 12 years in the Iowa Correctional Institution for Women. I exhaled. It was over. But it wasn't. The civil suit was settled by default judgment a month later. Jessica and Brandon were jointly liable for $460,000. Of course, they had nothing. The court placed permanent liens on any future income or assets. The restitution order from the criminal case demanded they repay the $210,000. It was a paper victory, a phantom promise. The house? We managed to refinance the HELOC into a long-term mortgage. After 20 years of owning our home free and clear, we now have a monthly payment that strains my fixed retirement income. I'm looking at selling within the next few years to afford proper memory care for Carol, a thought that feels like another betrayal. Jessica is in prison at Mitchellville. She'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. Brandon is in Fort Dodge. His parole eligibility comes in 5. I have not visited. I will not write. As far as I'm concerned, the Jessica I raised died the day she turned that first lock. People ask me sometimes, usually in hushed tones, if I have regrets, if I think 12 years is too harsh, if I wish I'd handled it within the family. Here's what I tell them. My daughter locked her mother, a terrified, confused, sick woman in a dark basement for 2 weeks with no food and no water. She stole every dime we had saved to care for her in her final years. She planned to let her mother die and then flee the country with the money. She did all of this with cold, calculated premeditation. 12 years isn't too harsh. It's a mercy. Carol no longer understands where Jessica is. Sometimes in a moment of fleeting clarity, she still asks. I tell her Jessica moved away for a very long job. It's easier than trying to explain the concept of a prison cell to a mind that can no longer hold on to yesterday. Last month, for the first time, Carol looked at me and didn't know who I was. Her eyes were wide with fear and confusion. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? The moment passed. An hour later, she knew me again, calling me Davy, her old nickname for me. But it was a harbinger. The final descent has begun. I think about that often, how Jessica didn't just steal our money. She stole our time. The precious, fleeting time Carol and I had left before the disease completely erased her. We should have had those 2 weeks together, making memories however small. Instead, Carol spent them in hell crafted by her own child. That is what I cannot forgive. The money can, in time, be somehow replaced. The house can be sold. But those 14 days, and all the peaceful days that were stolen afterward by trauma and stress and fear, are gone forever. So no, I don't regret the 12 years. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about drawing a line in the sand and declaring for all to hear that some acts are so heinous that they are beyond the pale of forgiveness, that the trust of family is a sacred thing, and if you shatter it, you should not be surprised when the resulting shards cut you to pieces. As for me and Carol, we're still here. We're still fighting. We're still together, for as long as her mind allows her to remember me. That's more than Jessica wanted for us. And it's more than she will have for the next 12 years. And honestly, for the man I have become, that's the only justice that matters.